Hello class, I'm Audrey Torres. Welcome to my presentation on understanding contemporary conflict resolution, theories and critiques. This is chapter 4 and 19 in the book Contemporary Conflict Resolution. A bit about the authors. Oliver Ramsbotham has taught peace studies at the University of Bradford since 1991 and has also been working at the Center for Conflict Resolution since then. Ramsbotham has published many works of expertise on areas such as humanitarian intervention, conflict resolution, and Islam-Christian relations. Hugh Mile is an honorary professor of international relations at the University of Kent. He has been the research director of many groups and institutions, including the Oxford Research Group, the Richardson Institute for Peace and Conflict, and the European Program at the Royal Institute of International Relations. He is a trained mediator and has facilitated several peace-building workshops. Also, he has authored many books in the areas of conflict resolution, nuclear weapons, and security, amongst many more. Tom Woodhouse is a professor that has worked in the Department of Peace Studies at the University of Bradford since 1974. And remains an honorary professor after his retirement. He developed the first conflict resolution teaching and research activities in that department. He also initiated the Center for Conflict Resolution, serving as the founding director of the center for 10 years. Much of his research is concerned with an examination of the relationship between global peacekeeping and conflict negotiation. Main points. Chapter 4, Understanding Contemporary Conflict. This chapter dives into conflict analysis as the essential prerequisite for normative conflict resolution. Theories and frameworks. There are many major differences within frameworks for analysis. Some theories are internal because they locate the source of conflict within the nature of the protagonists. Some are relational because they look for sources in many relations between conflict parties. And some are contextual because they look outside of the conditioning context that structure the conflict, and in some versions also generate the conflict parties themselves. Edward Azar's theory of protracted social conflict, also known as PSC, is an example of conflict resolution analysis from the late 1970s and 1980s, which anticipated much of the current preoccupation with domestic social roots of conflict and failures of governance. According to this theory, sources of conflict lay within and across states instead of between them. It draws attention to the violent struggle for recognition, security, fair access, and participation of marginalized groups, bringing identity politics and economics into the forefront. This introduces a separation from the old war perspective of direct violence and conflict management to the new war perspective of structural, cultural, and conflict transformation. Transnational conflict. Next, we see an update of Azar's ideas to a framework of analysis called transnational conflict, or TNC. This theory involves the transformed nature of the statistics of deadly conflict and of conflict theories that have come to prominence in the years since Azar's death in 1991. Also, the dramatic changes that have taken place since the end of the Cold War. Until the mid-1990s, international relation theorists and strategic studies analysts paid comparatively little attention to the causes, effects, and international implications of ethnic and other forms of communal conflict with a context of weak or fragile states. The Arab Revolution is used as a case study to illustrate the changes that TNC seeks to represent. At a global level, nationalism and socialism led the revolution, but failed in the creation of a strong government that addressed human security. At a regional level, complex regional and sub-regional dynamics formed a system that resisted change, creating conflict. In this case, the authoritarian regimes resisted democracy until the system collapsed. Finally, at an identity group level, complexities and mutating political factions in areas of ethnicity, sectarians, and class, as well as intra-regional rivalries, led to exclusions and conflict. Through these examples, we start to see how the analysis of complex conflict systems is integral to an understanding of new patterns of transnational conflict. Chapter 19, Conflict Resolution, Theories and Critiques. This chapter outlines 5 major theoretical statuses of conflict resolution. Pluralist, cosmopolitan heartland of conflict resolution. This section dives deep into the tensions between two theories, pluralism and cosmopolitanism. Pluralists believe in the international society of states, where the organizing principle is international order protected by the non-intervention norm, which thereby preserves plural values from outside dominion. This view is identified with conflict settlement. Cosmopolitanism views justice through reformed structures of global governance, progressively more capable of delivering locally defined welfare, particularly to the poorest and most marginalized. This view is associated with conflict transformation. The realist critique. Realists critique the idealistic aim of conflict resolution, holding that this field is incapable of addressing the real problems of wars, being self-perpetuating and profitable. The critical theory critique. This is a variation of the traditional Marxist criticism, which sees liberal conflict resolution as naive and theoretically uncritical, since it attempts to reconcile interests that should not be reconciled. It also fails to take sides in unequal and unjust struggles, and lacks an analysis within a properly global perspective of the forces of exploitation and oppression. The post-structural critique is defined as critical of universalizing and totalizing systems that are unaware of their own contingency. Human discourse is seen as a site of contestation in which competing versions of reality are constructed in the service of interest and power. Non-Western and non-Northern critiques. This critique holds that Western and Northern-centric ideology is not universally applicable as a perspective because it segregates differing theories. This limits the scope of influence that is acknowledged to mainly Western-based or influenced schools of thought, denying the vast bodies of controversies and academic findings. Strengths and weaknesses. For the strengths, these chapters were well organized, with the authors showing great effort to be self-aware and emphasize the evolving complexity of this field. For the weaknesses, there was missed opportunity to promote differing epistemic communities. In their recommended reading section, they could have included some non-Western and non-Northern original critiques. Questions. Number 1. How can Ukraine use the TNC framework of analysis at multiple levels of its conflict with Russia? Number 2. Can the U.S. use the TNC framework to address the human security crisis in China, specifically the Uyghur crisis? And number 3. Are there any perspectives that you think could have had a larger critique category of its own in Chapter 19? Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write them here or on Canvas. Have a great day.